Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Halprin. I am executive editor of Artnet News. And we are very pleased to welcome you to the first talk of a three-talk series about art world careers in collaboration with Art Market Mentors, a cross-industry mentoring program that pairs experts in the art market with emerging professionals. Art Market Mentors was founded in 2021 by today's moderator, Cat Manson, and Caroline Sayan. And together, I used my own math to determine this, but I'm pretty sure that together they've matched more than 400 mentors and mentees over the past 2 years of the program. And the idea was to offer art professionals support and advice during a time of unprecedented change and layoffs and furloughs in the industry. And so we're just so pleased to be able to offer the public talk component so that as many people as possible can participate in the program. And this time, this is the first of a three-talk series. The second one will be at the end of February and the third in March. And this time we're bringing together arts professionals with a strong track record for entrepreneurship and reinvention, from a gallery director turned career coach to an auction house rainmaker turned startup founder. And together they're going to discuss how art market professionals can set goals, cultivate resilience, and get creative about their career paths in the new year. Cat Manson, our moderator, left her role as Global Head of Communications and Corporate Affairs at Christie's at the end of 2020. She worked there for more than 25 years. And without further ado, I will hand it over to Cat. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first talk. I'm really excited to be here with our panel today, and we're going to talk about how to build a rewarding art world career. And we may get into what the terminology of rewarding means, because actually what people are looking for from their employers or from their work is shifting all the time. So over the past 2 years, the work habits have changed, work locations have changed, taste is changing, what's offered, NFTs, anyone is changing. And things are just as likely to happen online or even in the metaverse as they are in person. So this means the types of roles that are available are shifting, and many are looking for transitions and progression in a landscape that is unfamiliar. So as Julia said, we have today 4 great people who have a strong track record in change. And we're going to talk about setting goals, cultivating resilience, and getting creative about your career path. I want to introduce first the amazing Amy Cappellazzo, who's the founder of Art Intelligence Global. She has spent nearly 3 decades operating at the highest level of the fine art market. Beginning her career as an art advisor and curator, Amy was a key figure in establishing Art Basel in Miami Beach. Most recently, she was chairman of the fine art division at Sotheby's, arriving there when the advisory firm she had established, Art Agency Partners, was acquired by the auction house in 2016. Previously, she'd been market leader as chairman of post-war and contemporary art at Christie's. Jade Mitchell set up Blank Canvas Coaching to serve creatives and creative businesses. She offers a unique blend of coaching and mentoring for professional and personal development. Jade is qualified as a relational dynamics first coach and a practitioner of positive intelligence mental fitness, as well as an advocate of mindfulness. She combines knowledge and experience from her background in the art industry, where she spent 2 decades directing the studios of many internationally renowned artists and heading up artist management at Haunch to Venison Gallery. Dexter Wimberly is joining us from Japan, an international curator and entrepreneur who's organized exhibitions in galleries and institutions in Dubai and all over America, New York, Washington, San Francisco, and beyond. He's the founder of the digital platform Art World Learning, providing content to support creative businesses. And he also runs the Art World Conference, a series of inclusive workshops and events focused on business and financial health to help creatives in their communities. Prior to his curatorial career, Wimberly was the managing partner and CEO of the advertising agency August Bishop, representing clients including Adidas, Coca-Cola, and HBO. He is also a senior critic at the New York Academy of Art and the founder and director of the Hayama Artist Residency in Japan. Wow, what a CV, Dexter. And finally, Julia Henderson launched Draw Recruitment with Nina Langford in 2016, having previously served as CEO of Recruitment Solutions Group. Julia's worked in fine art recruitment for over a decade and works with many of the leading international auction houses and dealers to secure the right talent to grow their teams. I know she enjoys working with small and mid-sized businesses and finding people with the great skills and experience who make a difference in businesses. So guys, the common thread between you all is you've all changed direction on many occasions, taking bold steps, doing different roles with the same organization, or branching out, including founding your own businesses. For our audience here today, who might be looking to progress in a different business this year or within their business, can you share how you've approached and planned for change, including setting goals? Amy, I'd love to turn to you first. You know, your businesses, you've taken them from concept to incredible successful reality. What's your framework around goal setting?
Well, I always think my first set of goals are always personal. Like, what do I want to feel? What are my goals personally as I move through my life? Do I want an element of risk? Do I want to feel that kind of trust fall with the universe, that you're just pushing yourself over a cliff, hoping you fly? So I like that feeling. And I think if I don't engage that feeling, I'm stuck. So I don't ever want to be stuck. So the goals are extremely personal first. Then there are sort of excellence goals, like wanting to be the best at what you do, operate at the highest level, have a great team around you, enjoy your daily work life and culture. And then it's patience in the build, you know, to make sure you're building incrementally so you can scale your business accordingly. So, I mean, those are, I suppose, financial goals, obviously, and retention goals of good staff and retention goals of great clients and all that kind of stuff. But I would say first is internal, like what are my internal goals? Secondly, what are the quality of my life and my workspace? And thirdly, are sort of scalability issues, which I think a lot of people they kind of want to go from 0 to 10 without understanding the incremental steps. It's hard.
And are you quite disciplined about articulating those goals before you start? So you're very clear about your destination?
No, I just articulate them to myself, probably. I mean, I think my team, everyone on my team has worked with me for a while, so they probably know me reasonably well. But, you know, I think everybody understands how we all row the boat in the same direction and what sort of the values of the business are. I guess I try to lead a value-based culture. So, you know, we all sit down and eat lunch together, mostly. You know, we talk about ideas and what the right way to handle something is. We communicate all the time on group chats, on individual chats, whatever's needed. So it's not a really top-down organization. It's flatter that way.
Thank you. I mean, I know, having worked with you, that you are a garnerer of talent and a garnerer of ideas, and that's you know, in a world that's looking for strong values, I think more and more is really interesting. Dexter, I'd love to turn to you. I mean, you have set up various different initiatives and organizations. How do you approach starting out and setting those goals and articulating them?
Well, thanks for the question. Before I answer that, I also want to just say I'm very excited about this conversation. I'm looking at the number of people who are tuned in right now. And I think this big number is just a testament to Artnet. It's a testament to all of these wonderful people that I'm seeing on the screen here, because we've all done a lot of these where you don't get a lot of people. And I just think it's like fantastic that there's so many people interested in you guys and interested in this subject. So anyway, so congratulations to all of you. To answer your question, I mean, you know, you read my my CV and everyone else's, and it's always weird hearing the CV because then it like takes you down memory lane. The thing that my CV completely leaves out is all of the jobs that I've had, right? So like there are these things that I've created, like, you know, Art World Learning and Art World Conference, you know, co-created. I have partners, of course, but then there are those jobs that I've had, like being a communications director at a museum more than a decade ago, and working at ICI, Independent Curators International, in both communications and development, and other things that I've done in addition to all of my entrepreneurial work. And I bring those things up because I think people often have the misconception that everything is just like linear, that you set this goal for yourself, and then you wake up every day and that's all you do. You just work toward it. But there are always these detours, right? And there's professional detours, and then there's the personal detours, right? I'm a father in addition to all these things. I have 4 children, and I know in the art world, sometimes I remember my children, most of them are, 3 of the 4 relatively young. And I remember the reaction I would get from people, the look on their face when they would hear that I'm like working in the art world and I have like such a big family. They're like, how do you balance all of that? Well, to the core of your question about setting goals, every day for me is about accomplishing 5 or 6 goals that I have decided the day before that I want to get done. So there are these like micro things, right? There's all leading toward a big goal, but I give myself these tasks that I know are achievable in 24, 36 hours. So I always feel progression in my life. Because I think without that, sometimes the big goals can just seem so overwhelming, right? It's just like anything else, exercising, dieting, what have you. You just can't lose 50 pounds in one day. It's just not going to happen. Well, you shouldn't. And so for me, goals are the same way. So when I decided that I wanted to launch a business a few years ago, and my business, Art World Conference and Art World Learning, they're very intertwined. Without getting into too many complicated details, 3 or 4 years ago, we launched Art World Conference, which was an in-person event for artists and people who are creatives in general, focused on business and financial education. Because of the pandemic, we created an online education platform called Art World Learning 2 years ago. And that has become the core of everything. So now Art World Conference is under Art World Learning. And how this relates to goal setting, the idea for Art World Conference / Art World Learning was in me when I was still the executive director of a small arts nonprofit in Newark, New Jersey 4 or 5 years ago. The idea was there, but I knew that in order to get for the goal of launching this business, I had to, one, decide whether or not I wanted to work somewhere or go back to working for myself. Big decision when you have a family. A lot of risk involved. And then lastly, because there's many other folks here who I'd love to hear from. And then lastly, in order to accomplish my goal, I had to come to the reality that it wasn't something I could do on my own. And so my business partner, Heather Bendari, was someone who I discussed the idea with at a very, very embryonic stage. And because she was equally excited about it, I knew it was achievable because I didn't have to try to do it all myself. And I think that's a core part of goal setting and goal achieving, is recognizing where your strengths and your weaknesses are and being humble and honest enough to know where you need to have a partner, because partners are a huge part of accomplishing goals.
Dexter, thank you. I mean, I think you've picked up on some really interesting points there. You've talked about being realistic and setting achievable goals, that success is incremental and not linear. And also, who's going to support you? I have a concept of the kitchen cabinet. Who do you call on, formally or informally, to help you? You don't have to do it all yourself. I know, Jade, that you are and have been a great support to both artists, creative and businesses in your former life and in your current business. Can you talk a little bit from your perspective about sort of goal setting and the mindset, perhaps, when you are looking to make a change?
Yeah, hi everyone. I personally sort of shifted my kind of career. So I'd been working in galleries for many years, and then I worked independently for a couple of artists running their studios. And obviously a lot of that work was very closely working with them to set goals, project management, keeping them focused and motivated on tasks, and weekly targets and things like that. And then I was thinking about a change really for myself. I wanted a sort of different work-life family balance. And had this idea that what I'd been doing through managing all of these artists, that there was a real sort of opportunity there, and that so many creative people just don't have that partnership of somebody who can be alongside them, who can kind of coach them, essentially, keep them motivated, keep them goal centered and sort of results orientated, really. And so I thought there's something in this. So this kind of idea was growing, and I was sort of toying with it. But starting from, from scratch, it was how do I set manageable goals to get this idea off the ground? And I really started with the basics, writing lists of what do I not want out of this future career and this business. And once you know what you don't want, so I was trying to move away from commuting, and I wanted to be self-employed. I wanted to be able to, be the master of my own diary and things like that. And so once you're clear on what you don't want, you can then really hone what you do want, and then get yourself focused on those, and keep asking the questions, keep asking, how would I really love it to be? Really formulate that vision of where you want to get to, and then break it down. And also I sort of had to scope out the idea, I think, working out the time frame involved. For example, I had this idea, I thought, okay, blank canvas coaching, that sort of says what it is. How do I need to get there? Okay, I need to qualify as a coach. I need to do some training. How long is that going to take? And then, start to sort of work it backwards. So you've got your sort of short-term goals and the longer term, the big vision. The long-term goal is set up this business, blank canvas coaching, reach an audience of creatives. But then to get there is in stages, and work it backwards. And like Dexter said, managing other priorities as well, you've got to have your balance, you've got to keep it manageable and flexible along the way. So I sort of journaling. I'm a big fan of journaling, keeping a diary, so that as you're developing, if you're like me, sort of you've got this kind of entrepreneurial idea, as you're scoping it out and developing those ideas, you're just keeping note of ideas and contacts and people to connect with, and that also charts your progress quite nicely. You can always look back and go, oh yes, yeah, that I've come a long way, and giving yourself credit for the daily goals that you've managed to accomplish, and tick them off the list. It's a nice sense of progress.
Jade, I think that's ticking off the list is always a greatly satisfying moment of any day. And whether you're a list maker or a journaler, I think having some, getting those goals out there and down on paper, I think is always really, really interesting, and making those incremental steps. I mean, Julia, from your perspective, both as a business owner, but also as someone who, it gives career advice and sees people through shifts in their career, what's your perspective? And I'm thinking here particularly, and just picking up on a question in the chat, and please keep those questions coming, is, ours is not an easy industry to navigate. And however many goals you might set, unless you have the, good fortune of having that network in place or having those people to talk to, it can feel a little challenging. What's your perspective on setting goals and navigating your next career step?
Okay, well, I mean, I see people often when they're on the cliff edge, they're thinking about making that change, and they want to talk to somebody about actually doing it or not. And just answering that question specifically, my first career was as a nurse. I trained as a nurse when I left home, and I come from a coal mining town in the east coast of Scotland. And I'm now the owner of a fine art recruitment business. So change has happened for me in the last 30 years. It's been something that's featured strongly in my own journey, and I very much enjoy talking to candidates who are thinking about making changes for themselves. What I normally do, and I think my approach to change has definitely altered over the years. When I was young, and maybe as a nod to my former nurse, I used to do a little risk assessment in my head and think, is anyone going to die if I do this? No, I'll just get on with it then, and I'd, steam on ahead with whatever was in my mind that day. Obviously, that approach has become a bit more conservative with the passing of the years, but I still do that little risk assessment when I'm going to do something, and just think, look, what's the worst thing that can happen here? And I think that's really important when people are sort of a little bit frozen and thinking, should I change jobs? Should I give up what I'm doing to study? Should I start my own business? And just think about, what is the worst case? I mean, it might be I could lose my house and all my worldly possessions. It might just be that you've got to get another job. And I think it's really, if you can sort of frame that worst case scenario, I think that can really help you get off the blocks. So I think when you've done that, when you've kind of launched yourself off the cliff, it's good to keep, and I think really this has been said already, it's good to have the goal, the big picture goal, in terms of what it is that you're trying to achieve and why you've jumped, why have you made the change? And maybe that could be on a post-it note on your wall or something, just reminding yourself why you've done it in the first place. And then I always like a 90-day plan in my mind. Where am I going to be in a relatively short period of time? And that sometimes ties in with an employee's probationary period, or if it's your own business, you could get quite a lot done in 90 days. So I think a 90-day plan is useful. And then I break that down into the tasks. And when I started up my business, it's all the usual, isn't it? Get a bank account, set up a website. We've all got the different lists. So I tend to do it like that: big picture, 90 days, break down the tasks. But if anyone's thinking of a change, I think as a real basic, what's the worst case scenario? Do that.
Julia, that's really helpful. I mean, I think, and it suggests also be brave, doesn't it? Yeah. I think there's an element of bravery required. I spent 25 years in one place, so I'm clearly not the bravest, but the excitement of the new is actually, the adrenaline of achieving new things is pretty fantastic. On the not without its challenges. I mean, Amy, I know what a great mentor you've been to many of us over the years. It's easy to look at you guys on the panel and see, your success, but, when you're giving people advice when they're feeling a little anxious about change, or, wanting to pluck up the courage to make that first phone call, what advice do you give people around change and going for it?
That's a really good question. I mean, some people respond well with just pure force, like you have to do this, like you just must do this for your, it is required of you that you do this, and you play like they need a little push and a little bit of authority, and that works. Like pressure can sometimes be a great motivator. If they're sometimes it's sort of like watch by doing, like, why don't you watch me make this phone call, and then you can sort of affect the change, but like, try the same thing or do whatever the right thing is you need to do to have it work. But I think there is no change externally that's as effective as internal change. So you have to want to change, and you have to want to be able to do something different. You have to want to be able to advance what your skill set is, what you're doing, and you have to be absolutely fearless about failing. Like, it's a very American thing, very like West Coast, Silicon Valley, since everybody on this panel is not currently sitting in America. Like, people brag about their failure in business. Like, yeah, well, I started this startup and it was really great. We had this VC funding. We went for the second round, but then it failed miserably because a larger competitor came in and ate us up, so, but like, failure is its own badge of courage. So I don't mind that. It's okay. Like, you have to just be such a quick pivoter all the time. It's not personal.
So don't worry too much about the failing, because you just have to pick yourself up and readjust the horizon and keep going.
Right. And you have, yeah. And I think a lot of women in particular want to please people along the way, but that doesn't really work. Like, you can't be excellent and brave and break boundaries and be a perfect pleaser. So you have to not care what people think. And I think that's really, I would be lying if I say I don't have moments or pangs of wondering if like what I'm doing is too, did I say something that offended them, or did I do that in such a way that was brusque? But you just have to keep moving. And that's, you just have to just follow your own voice and keep moving. But you can't operate. You have to have confidence and a sense of self-reliance. If you don't have those, you can't please people first. Like, it never works.
I'm going to pick up on self-reliance. I think that's a really interesting thing to say, and not having the fear of failure and being, again, backing yourself. Dexter, you are in the midst of a newer adventure. Does any of that resonate with you as you've, thought about and founded and taken new directions?
It absolutely has. One of the things that has always been clear to me, and I don't know why, I have my suspicions, I don't know why. It's always been clear to me that it's all risk, that everything is risky or has risk involved in it. And because I internalized that idea fairly early in my life, I've been willing to go out on a limb on my own ideas, to have a tremendous amount of faith in my own ideas, sometimes to my detriment, to be totally honest, sometimes to my detriment. But that belief in my own ideas is why I was able to, start my first business when I was, really young, like 21, 22 years old, but back in like the mid 90s. So at a time when it wasn't so common, and it wasn't a sort of like the thing that you could sort of like look around and get a lot of support from your peers because everyone else was doing it. But I think that for me, I realized that if I don't believe in what I want to do, then it's very, very difficult to get other people on board. And so having that kind of belief, I think, is really important. The other thing I wanted to sort of like come back to briefly was the earlier question about goals, because I think on the one hand, talking about setting goals is really important, but also I think that the idea of like why goals matter is also really psychologically important. And I think like goals matter because they give you a sense of purpose. And I know that from the artists that I know in the art world, and I know people who work in so many different roles, wear so many different hats in the art world, but for the artists that I know, I often feel that some of the roadblocks that they hit is because they're not necessarily they're not setting goals that are achievable within their own power. And so it feels like maybe their career isn't moving forward or isn't moving in the way that they think it should be moving. And I know that can be very frustrating. So I think having these little incremental goals that you can accomplish really gives you the psychological fortitude to kind of keep going when things are difficult. And there's so many obstacles. There's so many roadblocks. We've all hit career roadblocks, and we will continue to. It's kind of built in, but I think it's like recognizing that that's pretty universal. I saw in the chat that someone talked about like, oh, it's so great to have access to all these people who've accomplished so much. And sure, humbly, I think I've accomplished some things. I mean, there's still a lot of things that I want to accomplish, but I still wake up with the same challenges that everyone else I know wakes up with. And that's like, how am I going to get to the next step? How am I going to get to the next stage? And it can be daunting. It can really, really be daunting. But I know that that's pretty universal. I hope I answered your question.
Well, I thought you did, and I think I'm going to pick up on sort of the psychological fortitude, and the concept of roadblocks, and also a question that's come in about in your different journeys, did you encounter other people who'd had similar ideas, and how did react to that? And I'm going to turn to Jade, because I know, having also done a coaching qualification, that there are a lot of coaches, and how have you felt in terms of your own sort of psychological fortitude about how you stand out in the marketplace when there are other people offering similar things? And I think I'm drawing on to this concept that we also touched on in the invitation around resilience. What have you drawn on? What advice do you give yourself, or how do you work with your clients to think through sort of these, being resilient and pushing to make yourself stand out?
For me, it's just about positive mindset mostly. It really is so important to build in, I think, to your daily routine, much like we all know that, you know, to be physically healthy, we need to do a little bit of exercise every day. We need to keep ourselves physical, but mental fitness is absolutely as important. And factoring that into a kind of routine and being quite structured about it, I think keeps your self resilience going. And you can only be sort of resilient to different situations and cope with change and be able to keep positive when things are tough if you can be creative, if you can be in the right mindset. I think when you're kind of backs against the wall, you're tending to activate a very sort of survival mode of your brain. And I think you need to build into a routine a way of countering those sort of negative saboteurs and keeping those negative thoughts at bay, so that you can turn things around and remember all of the unique things about you and your unique attributes and your strengths, and back to what your goals are. So it's sort of it's turning it around, and we're ultimately our own worst enemies. And sometimes, especially I find at the moment with a lot of clients, we're quite isolated. A lot of us were working on our own, and those sort of negative thoughts can really start to overcome you. And so I think checking in with yourself on a regular basis and being very structured about some mental exercises that give you that calm. I'm a big fan of mindfulness, and I teach this thing called mental fitness, which gives you some really accessible tools, so that even if you're crazy busy, you've got 2 minutes to just recenter yourself. That gives you the opportunity to remind yourself of your unique attributes, remember why you're here, what you're doing, what your focus is, and keep motivated on achieving what you really want to get out of your short-term goals.
Thank you, Jade. I mean, I think that concept of mental fitness is really interesting. And in fact, there's a very good Harvard Business Review article about the importance of stamina, and how, you know, the length of the pandemic, the length of shift has really, you know, the underlying challenges that a lot of people are finding with their mental outlook. And I think it's a really growing conversation, certainly in this country, and one that traditionally, you know, the support networks that are in place, or the support that the larger businesses offer, doesn't always incorporate that. But I think it's really important, never more so than now. Julia, we've got a question that's actually come in on the Q&A around what advice would you give, you know, again, to people who are graduating or are early in their careers, trying to make contacts, hustle in the art industry. What advice do you give people about how to navigate the environment?
Well, I mean, I think hustling or getting a foot in the ladder in the early stages of your career is probably the most difficult step, isn't it? The first step, and I think it's about gathering together some skills that employers want. If you have a look, I mean, we're lucky nowadays. Most things about employers or potential employers are all out there on the public space. So research into what jobs are available and what employers want it's really easier than ever now. You can go out, you can look at employers that you'd like to work at, you can see what jobs they're advertising and what the skills are required for these particular companies. And I think that you can set about trying to build some of the skills that would make you useful in these environments. And that can be, you know, nowadays when people are looking at strong digital skills, you know, I've seen some brilliant new graduates who, for example, to showcase that they have these skills, have built their own website. So they've got a portfolio to demonstrate. They've created their own blog. They have created a sort of almost like a digital portfolio to demonstrate workplace valuable skills and set themselves apart from other people who are in the sort of queue of graduates. So there's lots of things that you can do around that. You know, there's different language skills. You can't necessarily learn Mandarin Chinese overnight, but there's particular skills that are in short supply that you can look at developing to make yourself more employable. And I think that you've got to, even notwithstanding the pandemic, you do have to get out and try and network and meet people and engage with people, if not in real life, through this type of event. There's been lots of these, joining groups with other students as well, or other people looking for work. But there are, I have, having watched the entry-level market for a number of years now in the art world, I think it's, I think at the moment it's probably better than it has been, and there are opportunities there for people who have the right skills. So just really in summary, I would try and drill down and look at, what the actual doing skills are that are useful to employers at that entry level. And I've mentioned things like digital, IT, the obvious ones, technical skills.
Thank you, Julia. We've got a question that's come in, 2 questions, and I'm going to direct these to Amy. Alexis has asked, have you always had no fear of failure, or is this something that you've had to cultivate over the years? And my follow-up question is, which will be to all the panelists, is looking back now, what piece of advice would you give your younger self?
So well, I'm still afraid of things, there's still like reasonable fear around things, but I didn't have a lot to lose, right? So the more you have to lose, the less of a risk taker you are. So I didn't have this whole posh setup. I was afraid to lose in a day or something. I really just, and sure, I've been afraid of things, but I'm also old now and experienced, and I'm afraid of a lot less. If I have very few imaginary worries. I don't worry about imaginary things. I know if I'm worrying about something, it's legit, but I don't make things up in my head. I'm past that point. So part of it is just good seasoning. I'm a very good bottle of wine now, very, very aged and cured. I'd like to just say a little bit earlier, someone said this, stamina and the need for stamina. Stamina is so critical. So many people have low frustration tolerance. So what I look for in hiring people are people that have high frustration tolerance. The main ingredient to helping you through frustration tolerance and stamina, in addition to knowledge and intelligence and hard work and all those very obvious things, is a great sense of humor. So the fact that you could make yourself laugh in the worst of moments is incredibly valuable. And so I look for that. I look for someone who has that kind of skill or disposition. I don't know if it's a skill, it's a disposition. And I think you have to do everything you can to make yourself interesting. It's more challenging in the pandemic to learn a foreign language, as Julia said, or think about taking certain courses for mindfulness. That's all quite online these days, but it's hard to sort of test yourself out into the world, give yourself a test drive. But whatever you can do to enrich yourself is critical. Certainly, Dexter, I agree with you. Raising children is certainly something that stretches yourself. It makes you, potentially more interesting, at least at times. It can also make you much more boring, but it also can be more interesting. So.
Certainly does. I've got my parents' evening online later, and I'm not looking forward to that so much. I'm not going to give away which child I'm talking about. Dexter, one of the questions that's come in, which I think is a great question, and it plays on this idea of rewarding. The art industry is known for paying workers pretty poorly, especially at the entry level. What would be your perspective and advice to people when thinking about budgeting and sort of the financial landscape and financial worries when they are looking at their art world career?
Great question. So I guess I could be specific about my age. Okay, so why be cryptic? Oh, I'm 48 years old, and I've had to rebuild my financial life more than twice, right? And the result of starting a business, eventually closing the business, deciding I wanted to then come into the art world with no connections, zero connections. The day I decided that I wanted to, make a change from being in the advertising and marketing world to coming fully into the art world, I had no idea what I was doing and didn't know anyone, right? But I knew enough to consider that if I was going to make that career change, I needed to have a job, right? So like from a practical standpoint, I had no issues with the idea of just simply finding a place in the arts that was willing to pay me something so that I could have income coming in while I experimented with these other ideas that I had. So I could take the edge off of like rent and food, right? And this is going back, it feels like ancient history, but this is before I was married, before my 3 youngest children were born. And I bring this up because I think oftentimes people think that they can just kind of leapfrog all these practical things and just have the dream come true. The dream doesn't just come true overnight, right? So I worked in different positions at nonprofits, at for-profits, just as a way to not only have an income coming in, but also to start meeting people, right? Because that was like critical, to start building a network slowly but surely. The other thing is that calling oneself a master is probably not a good idea, but I believe I am a master at piecing things together, right? So much so that it's hard for me to stop doing it. So when I had to, it was like, okay, I'll work on this project for this nonprofit. I have this job here. I'll take on this writing assignment there. And then I'll do this thing completely unrelated to the art world because, hey, someone's willing to pay me to do it and I got bills to pay. So I was willing to hustle, but I had a goal, but I was willing to accept the fact that if you don't have a track record or a long history, we're talking about the arts, let's say in the arts, then your pay will be commensurate with that, right? Like that's just is what it is. No one's going to pay you the big bucks when you don't have any experience. Unlikely. The other thing was, for me, was that I realized that you could look for work or a job or a career, or you could create one, right? So I decided to create one. And I know that's not easy for everyone to do because where you are geographically may seem like a bit of an obstacle, or we can always come up with reasons why we can't do something, right? But for me, the thinking was, well, rather than trying to be part of some club, I'll start my own club. Club is just an analogy, I guess. But the idea has always been thinking about what was in my power to do and the things that I could create. Being an entrepreneur, I think, is something that I get a lot of joy from the idea of having an idea for a business and then seeing it through to fruition. But it's also about having a certain degree of control over my own destiny. And that's not for everyone. I mean, some people they just don't want to do that. It's not in them. Like my wife, she would never be an entrepreneur, even if we weren't married. It's just not in her. It's not her way. And so to the core of that question about the pay in the art world, well, there are a lot of industries where people don't get paid the amount of money that they think they should get paid. So I think that one, you either have to work your way up, and that's so cliche, but it's true, right? Find a company or business that you really believe in, and if you can get a job there and build strong relationships there, work your way up so that you can eventually make more money. Easier said than done, I know, but it is a path. The other idea is that you could create something from scratch that is your own and build that. But whatever way you go, you have to build. You have to build relationships. You have to build your reputation. You have to build your resume. You have to build your skill set. None of this is just going to fall into your lap. And it's like really critical to remember that. And sometimes you have to piece together a career. You have to do multiple things. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I think that's so true. I mean, I think the classic idea of an uphill career ladder is just rubbish, really. Sometimes you have to step sideways, step back, step forwards. And as you say, it's really not linear. I mean, I think the other thing that's coming through is how hard you have to work. And I think one of the questions that's just come in, which resonates with many of us, and I know everyone on this call works extremely hard, but burnout is becoming very real. And Jade, I think I'll come to you because I imagine you have sort of seen this both in both sides of your professions, as it were. But what's your advice around recognizing and perhaps taking steps to navigate burnout?
Well, I kind of experienced burnout very much myself, actually, and reached a point where I felt like I can't keep doing this. This is having a negative impact on my life. So I stopped and actually just took some time to really assess my options. And I think key in that is to try and think, rather than, you know, okay, I need to stop everything and what can I draw out of what I know that has potential. You know, try and see the possibilities from the situation you're in and view it all as a sort of learning experience. So trying to view it, your current situation, with curiosity, and, you know, looking at the facts, thinking, okay, this is how I feel, listening to yourself, but then thinking, okay, what can I do? What can I build on this? And what you were saying, Dexter, is, you know, taking it slowly. It does take time. Can you rebuild yourself? What do you need to do? And trying to put in a step every day that will head you into a new direction. Keep open, keep opening doors, opening connections, opening conversations with people, to try and give yourself some sort of new energy, so that you're trying to sort of shed that burnout feeling and re-energize yourself with the kind of the possibilities. There's this sort of technique called 3 gifts technique. So you can ask yourself, you know, what have I learned? What's the knowledge that I'm learning from this opportunity, from this my current situation? What's it teaching me? And what knowledge do I need to gain to change this scenario? Power, you know, what this is a tough one. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. What am I going to take from this that I can build on and you know, really make myself stronger and galvanize myself into action? And then inspiration. Once you've kind of shifted your mindset, then where can I go with this? You know, what can I do with this? There must be some seeds of new ideas that you can then start to grow.
So trying to shift to a positive. And maybe on a practical note, just how do you relieve a little bit of pressure? You know, how do you create some space, and how do you create, you know, you talked about it earlier about how to be calm. And I think for you know, for many people who are super engaged with their work, or, you know, it's very demanding, you know, finding those moments of calm can be really challenging. Julia, I mean, you see people at all levels at transition points of their career. So you must see people coming out of big moments and sort of, you know, and shifting to new ones. What advice do you give people around how to sort of maintain that stamina, or take care of themselves and not, you know, put too much pressure?
I mean, I've seen a lot of people, particularly in the last couple of years, who've come out of jobs who've been made redundant. Maybe they've been safe in a high-paying, steady job for many years, and all of a sudden they find themselves sort of thrown out other side of it. I also see people who've maybe made a change after a while and gone to something, and you know, horror, it hasn't worked. And it's tough for people who find themselves in that situation. And I think, looping back to what Jade said, I mean, I think you've got to, some people are good at it. Some people have, I live in a house where people like football, and I find myself watching Match of the Day sometimes, and I think that's where I heard the word bounce back ability for the first time. Some people have bounce back ability, you know, they've just got an ability to recover from, you know, some quite difficult life blows. Other people really don't, but I think that bounce back ability is something you can learn, but you have to step away from your situation sometimes and just take a breath and have a think in the quiet moments. about what you're going to do next. And it's not possible to do that, I think, immediately in the aftermath of being made redundant. I think it can take time. So it's about putting some space between where you've been and where you want to go. And maybe during that time, you know, people maybe do a few freelancing gigs just to give themselves some money while they're taking the time to have a think, or maybe they go away and, you know, have a holiday, or you know, however long it takes. But it can take a while, I think, for people to create that distance and to be able to reframe things. But I do think with resilience and practicing resilience, if it's not something that's natural to you, and this is just a gut feeling, Jade perhaps can talk about training in this regard, but I think it's something you can teach yourself to frame things positively. And I really believe that the more you do it, the better you get at it. I think it's just about positive psychology. You know, people will say to me, how am I going to explain this on my CV? It looks terrible. You know, I can't. And other people just frame things really naturally, positively, and they'll tell their life story. You know, they'll say, I was at Christie's for 20 years. I decided to go to a smaller gallery because I've always wanted to work there. And I got there and realised that working somewhere small was a complete nightmare. You know, it didn't suit me at all. And they just tell their life story in a very natural way. And I think that's absolutely fine. Other people just sort of, you know, get really defensive and try and sort of bury the truth. So I think it's just about telling your life, your human story. The bad stories are sometimes a lot more fun than the successes, right?
Absolutely. No, I think I think that idea of reframing and being positive is really important. I don't know, Jade, whether you've got anything to add, but I want to have time just to talk a little bit about creativity. Maybe we can do the same. And you know, again, you know, how you tell your story draws on creativity, but also people are looking for creativity now, aren't they? They're looking for people who think differently. I guess I want to just also hear from Amy again about, you know, I've seen you work on so many different projects and businesses. You know, what's your view on creativity? Is it something in you? Is it something can be learned? You know, what would be your tip around that?
Oh, I mean, well, yes. I mean, I guess it's like anything. It's like you would say, well, I'm not very athletic. Well, if you start running and getting physically fit, you'll start to become slightly more athletic. Like you have to sort of develop. It's like being limber or something. Like you have to make yourself less stiff and more limber. I mean, I was just reading through the comments for a second. You know, there's all sorts of practical advice. Like I recommend submerging yourself in water regularly. Like go swimming or have a bath. Like it's really good. Take a brisk walk. It sounds like grandmotherly advice, right? But have a glass of wine at the end of the day, like whatever it takes to sort of, you know, loosen up your thinking or recharge things. I mean, all this practical advice is fine. In the end, you have to just reckon with yourself and push yourself forward against every voice in your head, or, you know, every external voice telling you. Those you should certainly zone out. I mean, you should totally blot those external voices out. But that's just what you have to do. I don't really know how to deconstruct how you do that or what you have to do, but that's really it. It's hard in this pandemic. I think some of what a lot of people just quit their jobs because quitting begets quitting, and a lot of people have made a change and wanted to pivot. I think that's all admirable. There's going to be a lot of people out of work really soon because I can see not everybody will, you know, the sorting exercise is going to be a little tricky. And let's not forget that the art world, both on the not-for-profit side and in the for-profit side, is a massive disruption by technology, by capital, by geography, by this pandemic. I mean, you just can't lose the plot to your life. Like you just don't lose the plot. The pandemic has stymied certain people from keeping their eye on the plot of what they're doing. And I think as an act of terrorism is something that disrupts the comfort and safety of your daily life. This pandemic has done that for lots of people. So you need to we have some old fashioned American adage. I think it's American, like, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. But we don't really, everybody's kind of hiding a little bit, or lots of people feel anxious and are wanting to hide. And you have to just push yourself out there past this moment, past this time, past this moment of tremendous worry and anxiety. And, you know, first mover advantage out of this is going to be really critical. There are certain places where you want second mover advantage, like NFTs, for example. Let's see how it all works out. Let's let other people lead the way and go first, because all of that will look very different in 3 years and then again in 5 years. But first mover advantage on your own life and sticking with, like, don't lose sight of the plot is super critical. And it's a moment where a lot of people are taking external factors and using it as sort of justifiable excuses to not push themselves forward or keep developing their careers or find that place of inspiration or creativity or even peace and calm. You know, all that's key. We're mere mortals here. You don't have much time. Like, get going, get with it.
Amy, thank you. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I think I want to ask each of our panelists just to draw some final thoughts together, whether that's on setting goals, on change, on resilience, on creativity, on innovation, or any sort of final thoughts. And if we haven't covered all the questions in the chat, I'm sure we can come back to you. I can draw some of them over to our next talk if necessary. And just on a practical point, we are going to be matching our mentors later this week. I'm a little behind, but I will be doing it. It's just Caroline and I and our spreadsheets. So there isn't a big team behind us, but we'll be getting there. But Julia, coming to you, just some final thoughts of advice on how to build your rewarding career at this current disrupted, as Amy said, time.
Well, I think that people often ask me, you know, give me a magic list of what employers are looking for. What makes a good employee? And I always think, oh God, what am I going to say when people ask me for that magic list? Because sometimes it's just a gut feeling, isn't it? But I think I tried to note some of these down and put them into words in terms of things that I think clients are trying to say to us at the moment. I think people want employees who can see alternate solutions to complex problems, even simple problems, because of the changes their businesses have had to go through. I think people want people who help and inspire other people to create a positive working environment. Really important at the moment. It's harder because people have been remote from each other. So, you know, having people that are team players and actually try hard to foster and create a positive working environment, I think are key. People who are flexible in terms of what hats they are willing to wear. Employers are grappling at the moment with changes in their business. It's sometimes quite hard to really tighten up on a job description. Employers want people who are happy to be flexible, wear different hats, see something that needs to be done, you know, and get it done. And I think that people will do that, will be the people that float to the top, and be professionally curious. You know, I mean, I think that that's what employers want as well. You know, they want somebody who will come in and, you know, look for things that need to be done, suggest things, and you know, try and make a difference and add value. But I would say that's not just all down to employees. I think employers at the moment, you know, are having to be creative as well in terms of perhaps how they rise to the challenge, and you know, they need to facilitate team mentality and provide maybe more freedom and flexibility to employees, and maybe a better working karma environment in the office. You know, so I think that that's something that's on both sides.
Julia, that's very prescient. That is actually potentially the topic of our next talk in a roundabout way, which Julia Halperin might mention. But I think that's really interesting, and that sort of positive, flexible mindset on both sides. Jade, I'm sure at the term curious, your ears pricked up, but any final thoughts from you about how we as individuals can approach the moment we're in?
I think it's building on that inner confidence and coming back to this sort of mental fitness, giving yourself the space constantly in this crazy world to check in on yourself, remind yourself of your own personal attributes and skills, and being able to then roll with the punches, and being kind of realistic that things aren't always going to go your way, but it's all a learning experience. And what positives can you draw out of every situation? There's always going to be potential that you can build out of every circumstance. And also not being shy to collaborate. I think for me, collaboration and being kind of generous about asking questions, offering advice, and is a big thing for me. I think collaboration right now is is a great way to build.
I agree. And you talked a little bit about some of the initiatives, whether it's the Gallery Climate Coalition or the what was the one you were very impressed with? The artist.
I love the Artist Support Pledge. I think it was just, it's such a great thing, and it's now, you know, culminated in these big exhibitions that are touring, and it's that real example of people just grasping the initiative. It's open to everybody. It's easy to do. Getting on Instagram, artists are posting pictures of their own work up to their value of £200. And it's this nice sort of cyclical economy where if they sell work up for £1,000, they pledge to buy another artwork by another artist. So it's just, it's keeping things open and fluid, and seeing opportunity where there were barriers before. And that's for me, it's really great.
Yeah, I think that's a real example of creativity, you know, seeing opportunity where there were barriers before, and there's a whole other talk on that. Dexter, finally coming to you, and again, thank you for staying up so late and talking to us from Japan, where I know it's late. Any final thoughts from your seat?
Sure. I think this would be a good time for most people to evaluate and perhaps reevaluate their relationship with media, particularly social media. Obviously, if you work in social media, you don't have a choice. You're in it. But for the rest of us, I think that we should consider whether or not it's something that makes us feel anxious, or something that's bringing something good to our life, or if it's something that's creating more anxiety and more problems for us. I consume a lot of media because of the work that I do, but I made a commitment quite some time ago that I was only going to, you know, for things that are not specifically for my work, I was only going to watch things on social media or YouTube or any of these other platforms that either made me laugh, made me smarter, or made me feel generally motivated and good about myself. And if it didn't fall into those three categories, and again, something that makes me smarter can be incredibly boring, that I wasn't going to consume it. And making that change had a profound impact on my mental health. And it may not be the same for everyone, but I just recommend for people who feel disconnected from their goals, disconnected from their sort of like their peers in the professional world, and they're spending a lot of time on social media, just think about whether or not it's lifting you up or bringing you down. And if it's bringing you down, make a change.
That's great advice, Dexter. Thank you. I might employ you for my teenage children as well. Although I found that Ted Lasso has had an extremely positive effect on my mental health. So that's another one to consume rather than the negative social media. We're out of time. Jade, Amy, Julia, Dexter, thank you very, very, very much. I'm going to take away some micro goals. I'm going to try to not please everyone all the time after this, Amy, and again, stay curious and creative and brave about the next steps. And everyone who's joined us, thank you very, very much indeed. We will be back next month to talk about more matters relating to support and development. And thank you all for your time. Have a lovely evening or afternoon, depending on where you are.